falling one way and one falling another, together with the noise of guns. I shall never forget Chief Two Moons, Cheyenne leader.
Some say an invention by this man, Dr. Richard Gatling, might have changed the outcome for Custer.
The Gatling gun, in effect, was a hand-cranked machine gun. It was certainly the most effective of the early machine guns appearing in the 1860s. It involved a cluster of barrels, and as the crank was turned, the barrels rotated in a circle and fired one after the other.
They came in various calibers from as small as 30 caliber on up to 1 inch. They were very effective and could have a firing rate of as much as about 500 to 600 rounds in a minute.
But the Gatling guns were relatively cumbersome. If you're ever out in that part of the country, you'll see that the area over which Custer's force moved is quite broken. Ravines, hills, and so forth. It definitely would have slowed him down.
The gun was not going to be very effective, at least that's the way Custer looked at it, because he couldn't move fast enough. And so he left 3 Gatling guns behind, and who knows what might have happened had those guns been at the Little Bighorn.
Although direct confrontation between whites and Indians were frequent, there was a more subtle means to undermine the Plains Indian: elimination of the buffalo.
In my estimation, if indeed there was a gun that won the West, it was the buffalo gun. The single-shot Sharps rifle, in some cases the Remington single-shot buffalo guns.
I used a big 50 caliber Sharps rifle. It shot 150 grains of powder, and the bullets were 1.25 inches long. When one of these big leads would hit a buffalo, whether it hit the right place or not, it'd make him sick, and it wouldn't be long before I put another into him. George W. Brown, Kansas.
The gun which was more responsible in the hands of the professional hunters during this period than any other was the Sharps single-shot metallic cartridge sporting rifle. In approximately 15 years, herds which had numbered literally in the millions of animals have been reduced to a population of fewer than 1,000.
Buffalo hunters moving into Dodge City could stop at the firm of Zimmerman and Company and purchase a fine Sharps rifle. Rifles that might be shot all day, killing hundreds of animals. Rifles that might become so hot that water had to be poured down the barrel.
The Sharps rifle, interestingly, because it was such a long-range rifle, the Indians had an interesting name for it. They called it the shoot today, kill tomorrow gun.
These large caliber rifles, accurate at extreme ranges of a mile or more, capable of killing buffalo in great numbers. Such rifles were indeed tools of destruction, and they were very effective.
Wasteful as it was, the tremendous slaughter of the buffalo or bison herds, the 1870s, early 1880s, did have the effect of driving the Indians onto the reservations because their means of subsistence was destroyed.
Despite the fact that the Indians were armed and determined, basically you're facing a situation of a more powerful, advanced technological society over a primitive society. The Indians were literally thrown from the Stone Age to the Industrial Age in a period of less than 100 years.
The Guns That Tamed the West will continue in a moment here on AM.
Six-gun dexterity was required of the peace officer, and law enforcement in the West was underscored by the bark of Colt revolvers.
This is the Colt Model 1873 Frontier or Peacemaker. This gun is considered by many historians to be the most popular gun in American history of the West. It's a .45 caliber piece, 6 shots, used by just about everyone from lawmen to cowboy to criminal.
William Bat Masterson is remembered as one of the fastest gunfighters in bloody Dodge City. He bought his first six-shooter at the age of 17 and took it west by locomotive.
Gents, you will please make and send here to my address, COD, one of your short .45 caliber pistols, nickel-plated. Make it very easy on trigger and make front sight marker high and thick. Send as soon as possible. Truly yours, Bat Masterson, Dodge City, Kansas.
The newest guns loaded from the back and were called breech loaders. Their bullets were self-contained and could be reloaded in seconds. It was William Alonzo Hickok, according to the family Bible, but among gunfighters, he was known by a different name.
Wild Bill Hickok is generally considered the prince of pistoliers, and there are a number of different types of guns that he used, but the Navy Colts were what he preferred.
Billy the Kid, of course, is one of many frontier characters who were associated with Colt and other weapons in the frontier.
He was only 21 when he was killed. He supposedly had killed 21 men at that time. And he, like most people who relied on guns, owned quite a number of them. There's one frequently seen photograph of him in which he's holding a 1866 Winchester lever-action carbine. He is supposed to have carried a Colt double-action Lightning revolver because its small grip fit his small hand quite well. Yet, evidence is very strong that he liked a Colt single-action every bit as much as he did double-action.
It wasn't just men who kept guns in the West. The women, too, were armed and dangerous.
Some of the women on the frontier even became outlaws. Belle Starr is certainly one that comes to mind.
Of course, Belle Starr was often well armed with a Colt single action or Smith & Wesson.
Calamity Jane was, even though not an outlaw, was certainly a rough and tumble one of the boys, so to speak. Women on the frontier were in a pretty hazardous situation because often they were in isolated localities. Their menfolk might be gone for days at a time, and generally they had to know how to handle a firearm.
Small caliber and smaller revolvers and pistols, such as Colt manufactured, were popularly carried by ladies.
They certainly weren't the prime users of firearms. A great many of them knew exactly how to do it. They were courageous. And when you get to people like the Annie Oakleys, they really became predominant characters in the whole panorama of the West.
It was marksmanship that brought stardom to the peerless lady wing shot Annie Oakley.
She began simply as probably as a wing shooter, they were called. Targets were thrown in the air and she shot them. To make it exciting, multiple targets would be thrown and 2 or more shotguns would be used to break the targets. And in the arena, she shot using mirrors, she shot using more than one gun, she shot using a variety of calibers. Everything was genuine. Annie Oakley was, as she said, the first white woman to travel with the Wild West show. Buffalo Bill's was the first Wild West show, so she was the first.
The role of the gun in the West was a theme which would play out in the arenas across America and the world. It was focus on the gun that defined the image of the hunter-turned-superstar Buffalo Bill Cody. Buffalo Bill's Wild West ran for nearly 10 years as enthralled spectators watched the hunts, the fights, and the firearms that had tamed the land west of the Mississippi.
Whether the gun was in the hands of the immigrant who used it to provide food for the table, whether it was in a lawman's holster, a shotgun in the hands of a stagecoach guard guarding a shipment of gold on a Wells Fargo stagecoach in the gold rush country. Without the gun as a tool, the settlement of the West would have been a much more difficult accomplishment.
Keeping peace in the town or the city, it's the Colt single action again, and it's the Winchester. The cowboy and the rancher, and confronting the problems that he had, Well, again, it's the Winchester and the Colt single action. If it's the gambler trying to tame whatever he wanted to tame, they, of course, preferred the little guns, the Derringers, and hideaway weaponry. And you consider the Wells Fargo, their taming was, their favorite of all their firearms was the shotgun, which was the greatest tamer of them all.
Of course, it's easy to romanticize weapons of the 19th century West. But they were, of course, tools, and for the people who used them, they were important tools. It might mean survival if you needed food, or defense if you were confronted by an attacker, be it animal or human. They were tools that were relied upon, tools that were cherished, and tools that were often as not passed on to another generation.
As men and women pushed toward the sunset, they discovered a hostile land that would resist their advances. And though the West was eventually conquered by these brave, independent people, if they could speak to us now, some with regret, others with pride, they would tell us that their task would not have been accomplished without the weapons they brought with them, that ultimately it was their guns that tamed the West.
Imagine being held at knife point for 5 years.
Sounds terrifying.
We'll meet the ex-hostage who endured torture in Lebanon tomorrow on an all-new investigative reports. Now, let's see life through the eyes of the ultimate lowlife.
This better be good.
Oh, this is. The rattlesnake shakes his booty on an all-new Wildlife Mysteries. Next on A&E.
It's time well spent.
Airfare courtesy of Southwest Airlines, providing low fares, frequent flights, and legendary customer service. Southwest Airlines, just plain smart. Lodging by Motel 6, a clean, comfortable room for the lowest prices of any national chain. Transportation provided by Budget Rent-A-Car. The smart money is on budget.